All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We are going to go ahead and get started. It is the top of the hour. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MadCap Software. And again, I just want to thank everybody for joining. We do have some more folks funneling in, so we'll just give it a quick minute. But just before we get started, just to kind of introduce the webinar today, today we're talking all about how MadCap Central fuels team collaboration. How it provides actionable usage analytics, how it can help remove dependencies on IT resources, and more. So why is all of this important? Why are we talking about it? Well, with the demands for remote team collaboration and the need for increased productivity being more critical than ever today, well, in this day and age, making sure you and your team have all of the technology stacks and resources they need to stay engaged, productive, and on task is essential. So MadCap Central provides an abundance of features and functionality to support this, which is what we're going to take a look at today. So before we dive in, a couple of quick items of business before we begin. I do want to just kind of cover these quickly here. So let me make sure my slide's advancing. Very good, I think it is. Just want to remind everybody that the webinar today is going to be recorded and we will email it out to everybody. So for whatever reason you have to pop out early, that's okay. We'll send you a link to the recording. I'd also encourage everybody to use the question panel in the GoToWebinar console, and we'll use that as a place to ask questions. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me okay. I am going to turn off my webcam in a moment just to increase my bandwidth here. But please use that as a place to ask questions. At the end, we're going to do our best to get to them all. Whatever we don't have time to cover live, we'll be following up with a question and answer document for everybody. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Again, just thanks everybody for taking the time to spend the next hour with me. So let me turn off my webcam to make sure I have as much bandwidth as possible here. Just wanted to say hello to everyone. So let me turn that off. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we're talking about MadCap Central. So what is MadCap Central? Well, MadCap Central is a cloud-based platform that we developed. It's like a cloud content management system. And we developed it because we wanted to have something that works with Flare, not replace Flare, but works with it. And the whole goal of Central is to help you plan, track, manage certain processes, your Flare content, and the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. Now, you know, we've been at this game for a while now, and Flare is a fantastic tool for managing source information. But we realize there's some areas where, you know, customers have been asking for some things over the years that Flare doesn't do on its own as a desktop tool. So, you know, why did we build this thing? Well, we wanted to be able to support and augment all of that power that you have with MadCap Flare with this cloud-based content management system. So again, why did we build it? Well, we're kind of to break Central down into its main feature buckets. What does it actually do? What's its purpose? Well, let's talk a little bit about source control. This is a big thing. You know, teams of writers, whether you're a team of one or if you are a team of many, oftentimes you need an easy to use versioning system that everybody can use quickly. Or perhaps maybe you have a version control system in place that you don't necessarily like. And the thought of getting IT to get something configured, servers provisioned, things set up, licenses purchased, and, you know, all of that stuff that requires IT, not everyone has those resources readily available to do that. So this is an area where Central can help. With just a couple clicks of a button, if you have a Central account, you can get set up with source control very quickly, and all of your Flare authors can stay in sync. And even if you are a person of one and you think source control is not for me, rethink that, because it's actually a wonderful thing to have, even if you are a person of one in a single project. Source control provides so many benefits. I wish I had time to go into it all, but all of the instant backups and the reversion history, the ability to roll back, all of those beautiful things you get with the source control backend, and Central makes it really easy to do. In fact, it's a Git backend as well. Task management. When we built this thing, we observed how do people keep track of all of the things they have to do to write content and get it out the door. Think about when you have to push information out to your customers, your employees, whomever. You know, it's more than just writing topics, it's writing stuff. I mean, there's oftentimes, you know, a research phase. You know, maybe you're documenting some new features. Well, what are those features? Who's involved in developing? What do they mean? What do they look like? How do they feel? You know, if maybe you have to take inventory of your existing content and try to understand, well, you know, do I need to edit existing content to support these features? Do I have to write new content to support these features? And maybe you do have to write new content. Well, maybe you have to remember to get that content reviewed or translated or included in the table of contents. So there's often little workflows that you have to do. So MadCap Central makes this really easy to do. Again, we observed people keeping manual spreadsheets with sort of these manually designed workflows. We saw people with sticky notes on walls with to-do lists. We saw some teams who knew what to do, but they didn't share information with anybody. So it really kind of ran the spectrum. Central has this really easy to use task board that all of the authors in Central can use. And you can even set up detailed project level checklists to create little workflows that tie into your source files to ensure you're on task and you're doing all the things you have to do to get content out the door. What about the review workflow? Getting subject matter experts involved. Well, this is an area that's always been a little bit tricky. We offer, you know, for a long time, and we still do, we offer MadCap Contributor as a way to fold in subject matter experts into the review process, and that's still supported. And, you know, for some, that's still, you know, an appropriate solution. Sometimes we heard it was challenging, though, to get subject matter experts to install and use another piece of software. Maybe you can agree or disagree with me here, but one thing I've noticed is that subject matter experts can come in lots of different skill sets. You may have some SMEs on your team who are so technical. If you ask them to, you know, write, you know, help you design a CSS file, they could do it with their eyes closed and their hands tied behind their back. Maybe you have some SMEs that you work with where if you sent them a Word document for review, they wouldn't know where to turn on track changes in Word or PDF to make those edits. So again, it sort of runs the spectrum. And so even though, you know, Contributor is easy to use, it has sort of this Flare Lite interface. Again, sometimes people, you know, felt like, gosh, I don't want to learn a new tool. So what we've done is with Central, we've done away with the need to install any kind of desktop tools. The new review workflow using Central means your subject matter experts don't have to install anything. They can review source content in a web browser, and they can edit that source content using an extremely simplified lightweight editor. It's simple and lightweight on purpose. It's not meant to look like Flare. It's not meant to feel like Flare. It's meant to get their comments and their edits quickly so that those can be folded back in with the author's expertise in Flare and make that part of the single source of truth. So we keep the power of Flare as a desktop tool for the content authors, and we pair it now with this easy to use browser-based editor when we want to ask our subject matter experts to review our topics in a pre-published state. A couple other things here, and again, I'm not a big PowerPoint person, so I promise I won't be in here long, so bear with me here. A couple other items, though, I want to mention in terms of what the Central is Central offers a way to also manage your builds in the cloud. It offers optional content hosting. You know, what if you want to make your content available to end users and you don't want to have IT, you know, provision servers for you. You don't want a staging or a hosting server. Central can do this really quickly. There's also a translation management workflow. If you need to get a quote and an estimate on, you know, what's it going to cost? How long is it going to take to get my targets translated? Well, we have that in there as well. And then the last thing I want to cover before I put PowerPoint away, one of my favorite things about Central, so if you've heard me talk about this, you'll know I sound like a broken record, but that output analytics, those actionable business insights that help us understand when we're pushing all this beautiful HTML5 content over the fence to our users, whether it's hosted in Central or if it's published to our own private servers, doesn't matter, we can instantly start getting output analytics. We can start understanding how are people using all of this great information that we're providing to them. What searches are they doing? Are they doing searches that are coming back unanswered? In other words, if they can't find it in your documentation portal, are they opening up a more expensive tech support case? Again, not that you don't want to talk to your customers, but we know that if we can provide information quickly to our users using a self-service portal, and great search, well, then we know they're happier with our product and service. And that costs so much less than the human element of support. We free up our support team to really handle more, maybe some of those more challenging cases or that do require that human interaction. But we can really ensure that we're giving folks as much as we can on the self-service side when we pay attention to how they're looking at the content and what's missing and what's important to them on a day-to-day basis. So those are kind of, if we were to break down Central into its main feature buckets, that's kind of what it is. Now, you know, you can use Central for all of these things here. You can use Central for just one of these things here if you want. We have some customers using Central only for the output analytics because it's so easy and quick. The data that they're able to gather quickly and instantaneously pays for the subscription quite quickly. So lots of options here. We're going to try and touch on all of these today in our hour together. I may not get to them all, given some of the questions and things that we want to get to, but I'm going to do my best. So let me go ahead and put PowerPoint away, and let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to take a look at the Central interface, and we're going to walk around a little bit. And let me just get this going here and put it away. And I'm going to open up my web browser. Okay, let me just make sure you can see what I'm seeing here. Yes, it looks like we can. Okay, so if anybody is not seeing my screen, feel free to drop a little mention in the question panel there. I'll do my best to fix what I got going on. All right, so here we are in MadCap Central. Now, it is a browser-based platform, as I mentioned. So if it's something that you're interested in, if you don't have a license yet, if you're interested in tinkering it, what you do is you go to our website, you sign up for a trial. You know, there's nothing you have to download. After you sign up for the trial, you'll get an email with, you know, a link in there that allows you to create a password. That password's going to get you into this secure instance that you've created for yourself. So when you log in, you'll know you're logged in because you're going to see something that looks like this. You'll see your name on the upper right-hand side and your license label. This is just what you filled out on the trial form. You can change that if you want. It's sort of like your license key or your instance that you're testing. So when you log in, you're good. You don't have to download anything. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, oh, by the way, I'll mention, the first thing you see is this home screen, which is where I am now. My home screen happens to have what are called dashboard widgets. Widgets are just little information objects that tell us a little something special about what's happening in our instance of Central. Everybody's idea of what's important to them is different. So everybody's dashboard, every author's dashboard in Central is going to look a little bit different. So I'll come back to this at the end if we have time, but we can add our widgets here from the right from this little toolbar up here. We choose the widget that we want, and then each widget is configurable using this little gear. So if we want to see something else in the widget, we can. So again, I'll come back to this at the end. I want to do a little bit of work in Central first for some of these to make sense, but these are just sort of bird's eye view things that are happening in the system. You'll also notice on the left, we have some functional areas over here that I can see. Projects, analytics, sites, what's going on? Well, there's a lot happening. You don't have to necessarily start with anything in particular here, but a really good place to begin if you're tinkering with Central or you're just starting out is this users page. So let's have a look. This users page represents all of the people that can interact with our Central license in some way. There are 3 user types in Central. There are authors, there are SMEs, and there are viewers, and we'll talk about this. So when let's say you're the first person to sign up for a license of Central, when you come to the users page, you're going to be the only name on this row. So you can see my name here, I'm an author. You'll also notice I have a little crown next to my name. When you have a crown next to your name, that means you are an admin on the license and you have the power to do many things. Giveth and taketh away permissions, invite and de-invite people, deactivate. So there's a lot going on here. But the most important thing is when you are a user or an author in Central and you're that admin, you want to build out your users. And so you'll start by inviting folks to your license. So the way we do that is using this icon. And I won't go through all of these things, but I'll just touch on this. It's pretty straightforward. So when we need to invite somebody to our license, it's first name, last name, email, and then you tell Central, well, what kind of person are they going to be? Authors are generally going to be the Flare users on your team. So if you use Flare, you're going to want an author seat in Central because you're going to have access to all of those functional areas on the left. You'll be able to use Central for your backend source control, see the analytics, etc. So usually Flare authors are authors in Central. There's also the option to invite someone as a subject matter expert. The purpose of the subject matter expert is to be invited to review our topics pre-publish, and I'll show you that in a minute. The subject matter expert, when they log into Central, they don't see all of these functional areas here on the left. all they see is this reviews page here. I know it's kind of grayed out. I don't know if you can see it very well, but right here, this is what we'll see. The purpose of the viewer role is if you are creating and hosting output on Central that needs to be privatized or locked down behind a login, the purpose of the viewer role is to invite those viewers who only need to see output, who have to log in to see the content. So your published PDFs, maybe a beta HTML5 site or a live HTML5 site. So if anything needs to be protected behind a login, we can invite them in as a viewer. There's no limit to the number of viewers you can have. That's free. The only thing you subscribe to in Central are the number of authors and SMEs. So viewers are free. You can have unlimited. There's no eyeball charge to view private output on Central. And so once you tell Central what they're going to be, you can hit that send invitation. There's also a bulk invite. Suppose you want to bring in, 10 SMEs onto your license. We give you a little template. It's just a CSV file, first name, last name, email. You save it as a CSV and you can bring everybody in and tell Central that you want them to be SMEs. So you can do it one by one, or you can do it in bulk if you prefer. And then you would send the invitation. Right at that moment, whoever you invited would get an email, and in that email would be a link where they can create their secure password, okay? And so that once they're in, you'll see, let me close this screen here. The minute you invite somebody, their status will say invited. The minute they click that link in the email they received to create the password, the status will say active. So you'll know right away who you have invited, who's done what you've asked them to do, and who's still sitting on their invite. So this will change dynamically once they create their password. Now, when you're an admin also, you have the opportunity to sort of musical chair these people around. Perhaps you're only subscribing to 3 SMEs per month with your Central license. So you can see I've got 3 SMEs here. I'm using a trial. When you use a trial of Central, you have unlimited SMEs and authors. But let's pretend I'm only paying for 3 SMEs. So this would say 3 of 3. But because I'm an admin on Central, if I decide 3 months in, we're starting a new sprint and I need to bring somebody else on as an SME, maybe I don't need Jay anymore. I need to bring someone else on. Because I'm an admin, I can select Jay and really actually anybody on this list if I want to. And I can come up here and I can say, let's go ahead and deactivate Jay. We don't need him anymore. I'm going to free up a seat basically. Even though he's here, we've sort of put him on park. He can't log in anymore. So notice that my seat changed. So this would say 2 of 3 if I was only paying for 3 seats per month. So we can kind of move people around as we see fit. You may end up with more SMEs or authors that you're paying for, but only that number would be active at one time. So it's quite easy to move people around and administer who can do what within Central. So that's a little bit about users. Again, the 3 user types, and we'll come back to this in a minute when we take a look at the review workflow. Let's talk a little bit about the tasks page here. Okay, so tasks. This is this represents high-level tasks that authors can create for themselves and other authors to maybe create these high-level tasks that we want to keep track of, things that we want to do. So this sort of represents an active Kanban board if you've ever used one of those. So what we're looking at here are all of the tasks that all of the authors in this license are creating. So as you can see, there's a lot happening here. We've got a lot of tasks and to do. We've got a few in progress, and we have a few that are completed. So this is everything. All of the authors on the team can see this. So it may feel a little bit busy. One of the things that I like to do, maybe it's not, but I find it a little bit busy for me. I like to focus on tasks that I've created for myself and that others have created for me. So I like to toggle between all tasks and my own. There are additional filters we can look at too. Maybe we want to filter based on due date or status, etc. But this is a quick and dirty. I'm just focusing here on tasks that I've created for myself and that others have created for me. So if we take a look at one of these tasks here, I'll go ahead and open it. When you select it, the card comes up. You can see who created it, who is it for. I have some text here for the description. I have a start date and an end date. We can have a discussion going on this task. Okay, so if we have to talk to the person we've assigned the task to, we can have a little bit of a discussion here. If we need to attach some, Word documents or notes or some images or something from a meeting, perhaps that pertain to the task, we can put them here. So this is the details of this one. I have to practice the What's New webinar to present on Fictionsoft widgets A, B, and C. Looks like I have a little bit of a a typo that I put in there, but that's okay. So we have the details about the task, and I created this for myself. Here's a task. Let me open up this one. Here's a task that my colleague Mike Hamilton created for me, due on the 24th, and he's asking me here to review this checklist. You know, we maybe have a discussion going on. You know, I don't have any attachments, but I could. Whatever I do here, he gets notified right away. He can get notified through his email. You can create private, Central does for some notifications. It integrates with Slack. So if you want to create some private Slack channels among your team members when some of these notifications come through, you can do that as well. But we can keep all the details here. Now, as tasks move on through their life cycle, we just click and drag it through. So if I'm already doing this, I can move it to in progress. When I'm done, I can move it to completed. So we can just move these things through their various life cycles. And when they're done, if we want to move them off the active board, we don't have to keep them on there. We can archive them if we want to. We can put them in the backlog. The whole notion of the archive is we don't necessarily want to delete a task with all of the things that we discussed, and you can get to it right here. So these are tasks that are done, completed, but we don't want them on the active board. But maybe we want to save them. We want to come back to what we discussed. You know, what were some of the back and forth? What were some of the attachments? So we're not getting rid of them. We're just kind of throwing them in a banker's box and putting them up in the attic in case we need to revisit them again. And the notion of the backlog is, what if you have something to do? I don't know if I have any here, but if there's a task that you've set to do and you think this is a great idea, but we need to table this thing, maybe you don't want to delete it, you can throw it in the backlog page here, because maybe it's appropriate to revisit that in the future and bring it onto the active board. So a little bit about tasks there. Let's talk a little bit about, let's move on and talk about projects, because there's a lot going on when we talk about projects here. So when I select the projects page over here on the left, you'll notice this long list of things. What this represents is a list of all of the projects that are cloned or copied up to my Central license. So we need to clone our projects on Central so that we can use Central for things like source control, reviewing the up-to-date topics, perhaps doing a build and showing off what the HTML5 site looks like to some members internal to our company. So we need to sync and get our projects up there in order to see it. So remember, Central source control is one thing, but there's a lot of other things that it does too. So the way we get our projects cloned or copied up to Central is actually not done through the Central UI. We actually clone them up to Central from Flare. So I want to run through that quickly with you, because I remember I mentioned in the beginning that we wanted it to be easy, and we wanted to be able to be, we want to be self-reliant as authors to do many of these things ourselves. So I want to show you the process of getting it cloned in Central so we can start using it for source control. So here we go. I've got a project open. So hopefully this looks somewhat familiar to you all. Basic project. I'm just local to my machine here. So this project isn't living anywhere, but I do have a license of Central. And so I do want to get it cloned up there so that I can start using source control with it. So the way we do that is we come up to the view ribbon. You'll see there's a button for Central. So everybody has this. Okay, so if we go to MadCap Central, and oops, it logged me in because it remembered me. I'll go ahead and log out. Let me go ahead and log in. So this is what you would see. I'm essentially logging into my secure instance of Central. The password, it's the same password I used when I signed up for that trial. So we're logging into our Central instance right from the Flare UI. I already have these little buttons available to me here. And the first thing I got to do, in fact, I only have to do this process once. Once we bind our project to Central, that Flare project knows it's connected to a source control backend. So I only have to go through this bind exercise one time. I'm going to use this button, which looks like the end of an electrical plug. I get a nice tooltip that says upload the project to Central. And I'm going to get this little dialog. I'm going to get this little wizard show up. And I'm going to select my license. Now, I happen to be part of a few licenses internally for testing, so please excuse this long list of licenses. Oftentimes in the real world, you only have the one, which is your instance that you're using. So I'll choose my license, and then I'm going to give it a name. By default, Central's just going to grab the name of your project. You can see this project's called Review Workflow, so that's what it is. We can change it. It's just the label that's going to show up when we look at this in Central. So we can put a text-based description in there if we want. Again, this is just text that's going to show up in that project list when we look at it in Central. So I'll say OK. And we're going to go through, you'll see this wizard is going to continue. I got this little binding project exercise, and within not too long, it just took a couple seconds, I get a nice message that says bind successful. And I'll say OK. And you'll notice a couple things. I get a little bit of project detail here on the left, but also, I should have pointed this out, but 2 seconds ago, before I went through that bind exercise process, I did not have this integrated source control ribbon up here. But because I'm connected to Central and it offers a Git source control backend, I now have this integrated source control ribbon, and I have all the Git philosophy available to me here: committing, pushing and pulling, etc. Review history, or view history, excuse me, if we need to roll back as our little files change and we accumulate the deltas of these things. So it's all available to me here, and that took, I think, 3 clicks of a button, including the OK button, so that I could do that myself. I didn't have to ask IT to do any of that. So now we can instantly stay in sync. Now, what if I have other authors on my team? They have a license of Flare. They're authors in Central. Well, they need to get the project as well. So what your authors, what your teammates will do if you are on a team, they'll do the same thing. They'll come up to the view ribbon when they open Flare. They'll log into their instance of Central because you've invited them as an author. And what they're going to do is, again, this is a one-time step. All they have to do is click import a project from Central. And you're going to see a similar wizard. They'll choose the license, and then they're going to get a list of all of the projects that are cloned up on Central where they could pull. So doing this exercise one time, just by logging in here and choosing import a project from Central, that's like doing a pull or checking out the local files of source control onto the local machine. And once all of the writers have done that, well, then you can all stay in sync by using your source control ribbon. As you start making changes to your files, you can push and pull, and nobody's going to step on anybody's toes because we have source control behind the scenes playing traffic cop for us. So it's very easy to get the project up there, and then the other authors can log in and do a pull to get the current version of the project. Okay, so that's a little bit about the source control. And again, I wish I had more time, I'd go into more, but we'll do a little bit of this here in just a moment. So my project is connected, it's bound. In fact, if we pop back over to the web browser here, and let me see if I can refresh the page, we should see it show up. I think it was called Review Workflow. And where did it go? Oh, I think it's on, here it is. I think I have it sorted by name here. So here's that project that I just cloned up there. It wasn't there 2 seconds ago. So my project is up there. All right, so let's go back to our source. Okay, so here's my topic. Let's say I'm authoring this thing, and it comes time to, I'm coming to this particular getting started procedure. Maybe I need to invite some other folks to help me author this thing or review this thing, or maybe there's an SME that understands the server configuration, or a couple SMEs that understand the server configuration for this procedure, and I need them to help me write out the steps and give me some content, let me know what they think. And with our project bound and connected and synced, we can initiate the review process. So I'm going to do that next. So project, connected, synced, we're good. What I can do is I can use this review menu here to start that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this topic for review, just using that review ribbon. And I'm going to get this another wizard. You can tell Flare is very wizard driven here to make things easy. Here's the topic that I'm sending for review. Okay, I can add more if I want to, or I could multi-select a bunch of topics I want and send them for review, but I just have the one to keep it quick and simple here. And this is where we tell Flare, well, how do we want to send that file? Do we want to send it using Central, or do we want to package it up as a review package and send it using Contributor? So the process for Central and Contributor, we kind of started the same, so it's all here. But because we're talking about Central today and we want to show that process, I'm going to say send it using MadCap Central. I'm going to say next, and what we see is a list of all of the active users, authors and SMEs on my license. We can invite full authors and subject matter experts who are invited to Central to review our topics pre-publish. Okay, so I can choose as many people as I want on this list. I can really only be, though, for the purposes of this demo, I can only be one person at one time. So I am going to cheat because Tim is invited as a subject matter expert to my license, and I want to show you that side of the house as well. So I'm going to invite Tim to review this file, but no, I can ask as many folks as I want to review this license. One of the benefits of using Central for reviews as opposed to sending a contributor package or a Word doc or a PDF around is that we can have multiple people reviewing the same file at the same time. kind of like if you've ever edited a Google Doc and shared it with other folks, or a Google Sheet and shared it with other folks. It's kind of the same idea. So whomever we've asked to review the topic will be able to get in there and edit everything at the same time. Nobody's going to step on anybody's toes though, because all of the changes are going to be tracked. Okay. So I'm going to ask Tim to review the file and I'll click send. But again, just know that anybody can be asked to review. And we'll get a little message that says files have been sent for review on Central. Good news. So right at that moment, Tim got an email in his inbox. And in the inbox, it says, "Dear Tim, you have files for review. Click here to view them." And when he clicks the link in his email, his web browser is going to open and he's going to see this. So I have my Tim hat on now. So notice here I am logged in as Tim. There's my license. I have some instructions: review your topic, select a file from the left to get started. Notice on the left, because Tim is an SME, he does not see all of those functional areas that we saw as authors. The only thing he can see is this reviews, because that's all he can do as an SME. There's that topic that I sent him, getting started. And what you'll see happens is when I select the topic as a reviewer, it loads in the lightweight editor. Now remember I said it's lightweight and simple. Well, it's that way on purpose. The point of this editor is not to look like Flare or feel like Flare. We're trying to keep this as simple as possible so that we can get comments and edits as quickly as possible. Little bit of structural information here, very basic styling. Again, we want to keep all of the CSS and styling power with the authors, but we do want to give some basic styling information, which by the way can map back to our style sheet. Okay, so if I come in here, I can start making some edits. I just start typing. So maybe I say something like step 3 goes here. Okay, so notice that my change is tracked in the gutter. I can add a comment if I want to. And I can say something like, this is great, but check with Jim, or whatever it is. So I can add my little annotation in there if I want to. Very basic styling information that I said. So if I click in here, I do see I get, this is a paragraph tag. Maybe I do know a little bit about document structure. If I decide, you know, really this section should be a heading 2, I can make it a heading 2, crosses out the old one, drops in the new one, and I can start typing. This is the content for the configuration. And so if we had asked multiple folks to review this file, you may see some dynamic edits happening, much like you would in a Google Doc. That's the whole idea. But the point here is that all of our changes are tracked. We don't have to turn on any track changes. It just does it automatically. So the last thing I have to do is Tim, the reviewer, when I'm done making my edits and my annotations for this one review lifecycle, the only thing I have to do is come up here to this green button and click submit. Okay. So notice that my review status said it was open 2 seconds ago, and now it says completed. So as an author, you can always see, you know, maybe you did ask 5 people to review the file. You'll be able to see real time here in Central who's completed changes and who still has it open. You know, again, who's done what you've asked them to do, who needs a gentle little nudge. So when the last person hits submit on the reviews, you get an email, you get a notification that reviews are done. In fact, it'll open up Central for you. And if I go back to my instance of Central and I go to my reviews, these are the topics that I've sent out for review. There's that getting started one that I just sent to Tim that's come back to me now. Okay, so this is sort of the raw edits. And I can come in here and I can make some changes if I want to. But at some point, I need to resolve these things. I need to make them part of my single source of truth. So the way we do that, again, it starts and ends with the authoring team. So here's our raw edits. This is one we've sent out, but we need to start accepting and rejecting these things, get it into our single source of truth, and get it committed to source control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Flare, because that's where that process, again, starts and ends. So this is the topic we sent out. If you are using Central for reviews, there's another little helper window up here in the review tab that I would encourage you to have open all the time. It just opens up over here on the left by default. It's one of those stackable windows that you see in Flare. And this is kind of handy because this shows you the files that you've got coming and going from Flare to Central, from either you or all of your writers on your team. So what this represents, this is showing us here that this getting started has come back to us now from review. Okay, so it's got that submitted state. It's submitted back to us. This is our source. This is the reviewed one. So I'm going to open up this reviewed file here just by double clicking on it. And we can see all of the raw edits. So now I can come in here and I can accept and reject all of these changes as I see fit. Kind of like, Microsoft Word. I can do it one by one if I want to. Yeah, that looks good. Or I can use these little helper buttons up here to save some time. So I'll save some time since we're short on it today. I'll go ahead and choose accept all changes. Now, annotations, they hang out in our topics as metadata. They don't get published out as part of the project. So you can keep them in there. You can add more annotations and send it back out for review. Whatever annotations you drop in here will show up in Central for your reviewers, which is kind of cool. What if you have a long procedure that you're sending and you just want, a couple of folks to focus on step 3, 4, and 5? Well, maybe you highlight step 3, 4, and 5 here in Flare, drop in an annotation, and then when you send it back out for review, that's going to show up for your reviewers. That little bubble call out's going to say, hey team, really focus on step 3, 4, and 5. I just want to make sure this is right. So whatever annotation you drop in Flare is going to show up in that lightweight editor in Central too. So we can do what we want with these, keep them in there. We can delete them. Doesn't really matter. The last step in the process is to accept the file, which is this button here. And this is going to merge the changes in that we've sent out for review. It's going to merge it into our source. So where did it go? Well, here's our topic now. Let me open it up. You can see. And we can see it has all of those changes now merged in. Okay. What is this little red check mark box? Well, this is source control telling me that I've got uncommitted changes. So I can see this, but we need to get this change up to the server. We need to get it into source control so that it becomes part of our single source of truth that everybody can get access to. And that's where that source control backend comes into play. So I can use my source control ribbon. I'll go ahead and just do a synchronize here. And so because it's Git, we always have a local repository. We always have a local copy of everything. So committing means we're going to take that snapshot in time. We're going to commit it local to our machine. A good practice with Git is to add a comment. So I could say something like sent to Tim for review. I can't type with everybody looking, or whatever it is. Maybe you don't do exclamation points and commits, I don't know. So we're committing it locally here, and then we're going to push those changes to our remote repository, which in this case is, we have one source control at play here called MadCap Central. So that's going to be our remote repo. So it's going to go through the act of just committing it locally and taking all of those commits that I've made and pushing them up to Central. So there's a little bit of a delay in go-to here, so I'm going to wait for it to catch up. Okay, so now we're good. Our check mark box is gone. We're in sync. Now the other authors can sync and do polls to make sure they're getting the current version of everything. That's just the way source control works. We can push and pull all day long and ensure we are in sync and always have a current version of the files local to our machine so that we can work on them together. So the review workflow, again, I know I went quickly. Nobody has to install anything. That's the biggie, right? We want this to be simple, quick, and easy. We can invite SMEs, and we can also ask authors to review our content. All of the reviewing is done in a lightweight, simple editor that runs in the cloud. Nobody has to install anything. It's a browser-based review. So it makes it, simple. We don't have to learn a new interface. We can drop in our comments and our annotations and our changes to the content. We can ask multiple people to review the file. We do not have to necessarily daisy chain those review files around the table anymore, like we do with Contributor or Word or PDF. So it's an easier integrated way to get those instant edits back into our source. All right, so that's a little bit about the review. Let's head back over to Central though, and let's keep going. Let's take a look at the projects one more time. I want to touch a little bit on the building and the hosting very quickly. But for this part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into a different project that I've cloned up on Central that's got a little bit more stuff than my one topic that I just showed. So when I select that project, okay, so I'm going to come to the builds page of that project. What we're looking at here is, if you remember in Flare, we have our project organizer, and in the project organizer, we have a targets folder. That targets folder houses all of the outputs that we're building, our HTML5 outputs, our PDFs, our Word docs, whatever it is we're making out of our Flare project. Those live in the targets folder. So this Balboa project, if I were to open it up in Flare and go to the targets folder, you'd just see 3 target files. That's all I have in this particular one. So 3 different HTML5 sites, all pulling from the same source. But let's take a look at one of these. If I select this target here, you're going to see this row, or these rows. It's kind of like a grid. What these represent are the different builds of this target. When they built, when they finished, were they built in Central? I will mention too, you can kick off builds manually in Central if you want. So if I were to go here, for example, I could say, you know what, let's go ahead and do a build. And you can have Central do the build for you if you'd like. Or you can if you have Central and you've bound your project there, Central also becomes a publishing destination for you. So you can actually do the publish exercise from Flare if you want, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to necessarily leave Flare and come to Central to do a build if you want the team to see it. You can just publish directly from Flare to Central, and then all of the authors in Central will be able to see that private staged build. So you don't have to leave Flare and come over here to do it. But if you're in Central, you could right click and kick off a build if you want. You'll see a new row start here, and that'll go through, and it's actually not building on my local machine, it's building up in the cloud. But let's take a look at this one. What's happening here? So I've built this a few times. You'll notice I have a little clock here. What if I want to, we're working as a team, we check in all our changes at the end of the day into Central. We want Central to do the builds for us. We don't want to have to buy a build license or, understand the command line interface to write a batch target if we don't want to. We can have Central do it for us. So if I right click on this, you can see I already have a build, but we'll take a look at it. I can say schedule build. Right now, what I'm telling Central to do is build this target every weekday night at 1 a.m. So as a team, when we check in our changes at the end of the day, when we all come in the morning, we can log into Central, we would see a fresh new row here. And it would have, 1 a.m. And build complete, and we'd be able to check out the build. So do you see every build gets saved here? This is a little different than building in Flare. When you do a build in Flare, the old one gets flushed out unless you siphon it off somewhere. So we keep all of our builds here so we can check out this private URL is only available to the authors on Central. So we come in as, let's say we're a team, we come in the morning, we want to see how do our changes look from yesterday look, how does our new skin look, our new styles, our new look and feel. Central woke up in the middle of the night and did the build for you. So we can come here, we can look at the private URL, and we'll get access to what it's looking like. So this is our site that we built. Okay, we can check it out, we can look at our skin, we can look at our colors, etc. Now, I wouldn't be able to share this with anybody who isn't an author in Central. This is only for us as authors. But what if we do want to make it available to a population of users? Well, that's where we can create what are called sites out of these particular builds. So let me go to the sites page real quick. And what this represents is a list of all of the sites that I've created across the different projects that I've synced to Central. So these sites can be publicly facing, they can be private, meaning we need a login to see them. So you can do a little bit of both. This just aggregates all of the HTML5 and PDFs and the target outputs from Flare that you're hosting and making available to your customers if you choose to use Central to host. You don't have to, but if you want to, it's quite easy to do. So let's take a look at some of these real quick. I already configured some. Let's take a look at this public site, okay? So if I already created it, but let's have a look. So I know it's live because it's got that little globe and I have a nice little tooltip here, but let me edit the settings of this site so we can take a look. So I gave the site a name. I also have a domain here. So out of the box, Central gives you a domain that you can use. Some of these things you can change some of this though. So my domain, I changed it to my docs. And then we have this mcoutput.com, and then we have a vanity here. So my URL, we can see, let me see, I'll move it over. You see it says mydocs.mcoutput.com. So we can change this quite easily. We can change the vanity. What if we're versioning all of our builds? We got V1, V2, V3. We can put those little target vanities in there. And then the rest would be that default.htm, that entry point into your site, or into your HTML5 sites. So I've got this one just sort of using a sample vanity here. And then here's where we tell the site, okay, well, what project are we going to create the site out of? So I selected Balboa. Again, this is all of the projects that we've connected to Central. Okay, so I chose my project. I also chose the specific build that I want to make a site. So I'm able to choose the actual, the actual target file. So remember we had those target files. I want it to make a site out of this target, and I want to specifically say, use this build to be live. This is the one that's approved, it's ready to go, that's the one we're going to do it. That's the one that's going to be live for everybody to see. Okay, so I've chosen that particular build, and what I get is this URL. So if I were to give all of you, all of the many hundreds of you in here right now, if I were to give you this URL, what you would see, let me go ahead and copy this here. and I'll paste that URL in, you would actually see my knowledge base. So this would be the approved output. Okay, it's public. Now, a couple other options for public sites. Let me go back here. Maybe we want to be public, but maybe we want to choose whether we want search engines to crawl it. So some people want their docs to be publicly facing. They want it crawled in Google. They want the current version, because sometimes documentation can be used as an asset to your company. It's a selling tool. You want Google, if somebody searches what's new in my product, you want Google to show that. And you want people to see what's new in the latest release if it happens to be in your docs. Not everybody has that. Some people have it behind lock and key, and that's fine. But if you are setting it to live, you can even tell Central, well, yeah, I want it live, but maybe I don't want the search engines to find it, or maybe I do want the search engines to find it. Okay, so we can check that box if we want the engines to crawl it. Okay, so a little bit about the site. What about this one? Well, let's take a look at the properties of this one. So again, I gave it a name. Okay, it's the same project. It's my Balboa project. It's the same target, but this time I said, I want this to be the latest build, because maybe we're building nightly. And I want this one to be I always want this particular URL to be the latest build. Why? Well, I've noticed here that I've set this one to private, because maybe I want the beta site to be available to a population of people. I want some maybe internal QA engineers, or maybe some of my partners. I want to privatize this site, but I want them to be greeted with a login in order to see it. So that's what I've done. So this is the current build. So every time we do a new build of this particular target, this URL isn't going to change, but everybody's going to have access to the current content. A couple other things about private sites that you need to be mindful of. In order to view a private site, you need to group those people together into what's called a team. So let's take a look at the teams. I've got 3 teams in my central license. I've grouped the sales team together. I've grouped my SMEs together, and I have this other one here called the A team. So teams are done over here. We create teams. Teams can be viewers, SME, or authors. But it's especially important when you're privatizing your output and you've got a population of people that are going to be viewers only. They're not doing anything in Central except viewing output. So you can group these people together as you want, and you can say, for this particular private site, I want to lock it down to these teams of users. They could be SMEs, they could be viewers, they could be a combination of both. Okay, so that's what I've done. I've said for this private site, only the people associated with the sales team and this SME team can get to it. So if they got their hands on this URL, if I send this to them, in fact, when you get added to a site, you actually get a notification that you have, and you get a link to view it. But since this is private, let me go back here to my other web browser. When I select this thing, hopefully do you see how I'm greeted with this login page? I created this login theme. So this looks madcappy only because I made it look madcappy. You may want to customize the way that login page works. I just used my own corporate logos and colors here. And this is where I would actually log in with my email address to get to it. So I'm logging in as one of my viewers here to this site because I'm cheating. And once I log in appropriately, well, then I can get to the beta. So this one has, my other one didn't have new features. What if I'm publishing a knowledge base and I want to show my partners the new features initially? So this doesn't have, this is only available in this private site. It's not in the live one that we just set that's public. So again, it's a way to control what your viewers see. And then that login can be sort of customized or themed, I should say. Let's take a look at that real quick. So that's how we make sites public or private. Quite easy to do. We can do it ourselves if we want to. Again, this is optional. You don't have to use Central for hosting, but we're just trying to make it easy for you to do that. Themes, let's take a look at that. You can see I've got 3 themes here. I have one called FictionSoft, which is just kind of plain. I have one called MadCap Corp. This is the theme that you saw for that particular site. So I you can change it's kind of like a skin in Flare. You can design the custom, screens that people would see as they interact with your private sites. You can change so many elements, the link color, the fonts, the card colors, is there a gradient? So I just use my corporate hex values here that are given to me, and I can change it. I can even change what the pop-ups look like. I can change what the loader looks like and the color of it, for example. Here's a third one I created. This is for the sales team. So you can see it looks a little bit different. So even though it's very Madcap-y, don't think you have to make it look like that. You can brand it with your own logos and colors and things. The URLs, this is what I was talking about in terms of the domain. Again, out of the box, we give you a domain that you can use. This is super easy. If you don't like that My Docs and you want it to be something else, you can change it. If you're just using the central domain, you can't get rid of that. But if you want that URL to be branded a little bit, maybe you want it to be docs.mycompany.com/v1 and then default.htm. You can create what's called a host map domain. We have that CNAME support. So you would use this little plus button here, and you would add your host map domain. So this would be like, docs.madcapsoftware.com or something like this. This is the one area where though you do kind of have to work with somebody that can, make sure that this domain is registered properly. So once the domain is registered properly, you may have to work with somebody on that. Give you a little tooltip here about what this is. So it's like an alias. Right? So even though it's being served up on Central, the URL looks branded to your company name. We don't have that MC output thing anymore. So once all of that's done, you can upload a Madcap generated SSL, or maybe your web folks want to use your own. So you can choose what you want to do. And then once you click save, yes, I do want to close this. Of course, I don't have that map, so that's not going to work. But once you click save, your main that URL is going to change to docs.madcapsoftware.com, and then whatever your target vanity is, v1, v2, v3. Okay. So again, optional content hosting, not required, but easy so that you can be self-reliant to do it yourself and not have any other servers provisioned to get your content available to your customers or your employees. Okay. So it's a little bit about sites. Let me look at my time. Oh my gosh, I'm running out. Couple things I want to mention here. We talked about builds. We talked about automating builds, which Central can do for you, creating public and private sites as an optional hosting engine if you'd like. I do want to touch on the analytics though, because this is probably one of the, maybe I'm biased. I think this is so fun and cool. So I want to have time to show this off. The analytics is that piece that I mentioned where we can start gathering those actionable insights and the data into our published HTML5 sites. And I'll say this again because sometimes it doesn't register right away. The fun thing about analytics is that our output, our HTML5 output, it can be hosted anywhere. We do not have to bind and use Central as a hosting engine or a source control in order to get the output analytics. Again, your content can be hosted anywhere. What if you publish it to your own Amazon S3 buckets that requires, tons of single sign-on or tons of authentication to get there? What if you're publishing your HTML5 sites and they're shipping with your product and they live local on end users' desktops, like Madcap Flare help, for example, right? You install Flare locally. That help that you access through Flare is actually being tracked in our license of Central. We're not looking at who you are or where you are or what you are, but the purpose of the output analytics is to understand how you're searching it, what topics are important, and what's missing from the documentation. So again, all you need is a Central account in order to get output analytics. So I'm going to show you where you do that, because this is something that you can test today if you want to. If you don't already have this going, you can use a trial. So let's go back to Flare real quick. By the way, what these represent are the different targets that I'm tracking across different Flare projects. Okay, so these are 3 different Flare projects, 3 different targets. And I've told Flare, within Flare, I said, hey, I want to start tracking these things. Okay, so one Central account, you can track as many target outputs as you want, HTML5 target outputs as you want, across as many projects as you want. It's really flexible. And you don't have to even bind your project to Central or host it there in order to get these analytics. All you need is that account. So let's go back to Flare and I'll show you what I mean. For this exercise, I'm actually going to pull up another project that has a little bit more stuff. So let's take a look at this one. So a few more topics here to look a little nicer. Let's go to our project organizer where our targets live, because that's where you set up the connection between the target and Central. Because remember, we're using Central as our window into all of this data. Okay, so when we're hosting HTML5 output and we're using Flare Search or the built-in, either a built-in Elasticsearch or Flare Search, we can start gathering this data because it's a Flare contained site. Let's look at this target. Okay, this is an HTML5 target, and we'll give it a chance to open up and go to catch up on you here. I think there's a little bit of a lag, so let me just give it a moment. Okay, I think you're seeing what I'm seeing now. In the target editor, down here, we have an analytics tab. And this is where you can say, hey, I want Central to start tracking this, okay? So I have Central loaded here as my provider. I logged into my Central license. I did this a couple minutes before the webinar just to save a minute. Doesn't take long, takes a half a second. I choose my license, which is the one I've been playing with. And then all you have to do is create a key, which is what I did. I created a key and I called it Austin KB, and I gave it a little description. So there's a little dialogue here that allows you to do that. The moment you create that key, it shows up in Central. All you have to do then at that point is build and publish your output anywhere. You can, again, publish it to Central. Maybe you have publishing destinations set up in your project where this particular knowledge base, it's got to live on your own internal servers. That's fine. As long as you publish it with this little tracker in here, you can use Central as your window into the data. So I went ahead and did that. In fact, let's go back to Central and you can see it. That's this one here. Okay, I created it just before the demo today. And let's go ahead and select it. So we start, the minute we build and publish with the tracker, you can see we're starting to get data on here. So let's build it again. And let me get a most current version and we'll do some searches here. So I'll build it real quick. I'm just going to build it locally to my machine. Because again, the output can be local, doesn't have to be hosted in Central. I want to point out while this is building, this project is completely decoupled from Central. I'm not using Central for source control. I haven't bound the project. All I need is that Central account in order to get the data. Okay, so it's there. Let's take a look at it. We're done. And let's start searching. Maybe I'll search for HQ. I did some of these searches earlier to populate it. And maybe we search for, I'll search for Austin. Again, we get some results. I'm going to click on this here a couple times. So we're using this thing. If I go back to Central here, I'll just click this one more time, I'll refresh. We can see the data is populating automatically. What are we looking at? Well, we're instantly gathering some search queries here. Let's take a look at the phrases. Okay, so phrases represent searches that actually yield results. Okay, so these are the queries that I did this starting at 9:06 a.m. this morning. I was trying to populate it. So these are the queries that are searched here, okay, and the number of results that were provided as a result of that search. Or I'm sorry, I take that back. How many times that query was used in the time frame. So Austin was searched on twice, this particular term. This is telling us the actual results that were given. So when you do a search and you get the long list of results, this is going to tell you the number of topic results that were actually offered. This is actually telling us whether micro content was offered as a result. Okay, so what is micro content? Micro content is, let me search for Austin one more time. This is micro content. It's a curated answer to a specific set of search terms or queries or questions. So yes, we get a lot of topic hits, but I said, hey, if somebody searches on Austin or Austin city limits or ACL, I want this to show up. I don't want them to have to look through all of these results. I want to give them a quick directed answer. That's micro content. So what Central can tell us is, hey, if somebody did a search, did the micro content show up? This is a huge important strategy. If you're going to be building out micro content, which is an amazing feature and something that can really make the search stand on end and do, it does wonders for the usability of all this great content that you're producing. It's sometimes hard to know where to even begin when it comes to how do I start building out micro content? What are people searching on? Well, you can guess, but this is going to tell you exactly how people are searching in your doc portal. So you know what you need to do. Like we can see here, I can filter even. I can say, I don't want to see results with micro content. Maybe I just want to see my searches where I don't have micro content yet. So if I start seeing South by Southwest here, XSW, and I see these numbers increasing, and I don't have micro content, maybe I start creating some micro content phrases in Flare that say SXSW or South by Southwest, and I can create a response. Because again, I'm using the search behaviors that my customers are doing to build up the micro content. So it's a great way to begin that micro content strategy, because it can be, let me clear that filter so we see everything. It can be really daunting to even begin. How do I start building out my phrases? Well, use the data to help you. Don't guess. Let's take a look at phrases with no results. These are the searches that people are typing in that are coming back with nothing. Okay, let me do one more search here. Maybe we can see it. Hopefully, sometimes it can take a second, so hopefully I can see this. It's instantaneous here. So searched on Jen, didn't come back with anything. So there it is. Do you see how it instantly showed up? So you can pay attention to these queries. This is the stuff your readers are looking for that's coming back with nothing. If we didn't find the answer here, what are they doing? Maybe they're opening up a support ticket. Maybe you have a little support ticket widget in your output, or you've got a link to open up a support case or something like that. So we need to pay attention to this, because this is the stuff that people want that they can't yet find. And this is telling you the number of times that they tried to use that query. So again, really important to take advantage of. And if we can reduce these, well, then we have a really amazing impact on the bottom line, right? This costs a lot less than support and the human element. So if we can ensure that people, if we can ensure that people are finding what they need here, we can start saving the company some money. The topics, these are the actual topics that people are clicking on over the course of the time that you specified. By the way, each of these has a date filter. You can filter by date if you want to kind of see how you're doing over time. I'm just looking at everything here since I just published this. But this is telling you the topics that people actually click on. So this is the stuff you want to keep in, that should stay up to date, because this is important to your viewership. Let's see, I don't think I have any context sensitive help. Let me look at it for these context sensitive help and some of these demographics. Let's look at another target that I'm tracking that does have a little bit more stuff in there. Let's look at this one. So let's go down to, you can see I've got some more content in here. I've got a few more phrases with no results. Like in this example, I got a lot of people looking for scripting, JavaScript examples, and they're not finding it. I can see these numbers increasing. I should probably create some content to support what people are searching for here. But let's take a look at context sensitive help. What does this mean? Well, if you're attaching your topics and from Flare, if you're embedding your help into your app, you're most likely using our context sensitive help API to do that. So what this is going to tell you is where in the application are people getting stuck and asking for help? Okay, where are they clicking on the little info button or the help button? You know, when they're actually invoking the tooltip or the topic for the page or the field level help, this is recording that identifier that's being used. So we know the topic, we know the title of the topic, and we can see the number of times that call is actually made from within the app. So maybe we don't have a doc problem here. Like if we look at, you know, ID 1004, it's calling this particular topic. You know, this is 7, it's not a huge number. What if this was called, you know, 100 times in the last 2 weeks? Maybe there's something really weird about the UX within our app. Why is everybody getting stuck there and calling for help? You know, maybe we can improve the UX here because everybody's confused, or maybe we need to, you know, change our training approach because everybody seems to be calling for help in this area of the app. So you may not have a doc problem necessarily. Maybe we can improve the UX of the application that we're supporting. Browser stats and operating system stats is kind of interesting. This is telling you the browsers that people are using to actually hit your portal, the number of times that browser version is used and the percentage. So this can help you make some decisions internally too about, gosh, you know, what browser should we actually test and use internally? You know, if we come down here, if I have a, you know, some, you know, old version of Firefox here, and let's say this is a super old version of Firefox, or what if you have an old version of Internet Explorer show up on this list, and you've got one person in the last, you know, year that's used it? Why do you keep breaking your neck trying to support that old version of IE? Maybe you draw a line in the sand. You know, you're not guessing. This is actual data. You're seeing the browsers that your customers are using and the version. And if you don't think that you have mobile users, this is going to tell you as well. We can see I've got a mobile phone using, you know, the Safari browser on a mobile phone actually accessing this. So if we need to think about making sure we test on mobile devices, you know, sometimes people say, well, I don't need to worry about mobile or tablet. Nobody looks at it. Well, they run their analytics and think, oh my God, people are looking at it. Are we using responsive layouts in Flare to ensure everything looks great on a phone or a tablet? So we don't want people using their thumb and their index finger, of course. Operating system, kind of the same idea. What OSs are being used to hit that site? So maybe we use this internally to make some decisions. Again, here are those mobile phones hitting my output. So more ammo if you need to kind of justify creating responsive layouts and putting, in thinking about that kind of thing. So again, it's showing us all of that stuff real time. We're not seeing who specifically, we're not violating any privacy laws, but we're looking at the usage behavior within the published output. Okay, I'm looking at my time. You guys, I'm so sorry I've gone over. Once again, you're going to give me the hook off the stage here. So let me make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Just coming back to the home page again, some of these widgets here, we can customize these things. I didn't have a chance to talk about checklists here, but I'll just kind of show this real quick. Let me go into this particular checklist. I said, these kind of relate to tasks, but these allow us to create workflows into various project files. So you can see I created a checklist here for widget B integration within this particular project. And every time, you can notice I have this little breadcrumb. This represents my folder where these topics live in my project. So if I happen to add a feature into this directory in my Flare project, it's going to show up here on my list and I can start tracking. I created these little workflows so I know what we need to do. So feature 1, you can see this is in progress. As I add index keywords, I can say this is complete. Maybe it comes back for review. I can come here and say I'm complete. So we've got some workflows here. Maybe I need to start researching this feature. So if I need to walk into a meeting and somebody says, well, how done are we with the docs for widget B integration? I can come here. I know exactly where I am because this is tracking it for me. I don't have a spreadsheet that I have to manually do everything. All these things tie into our project files. They can be generic, these checklists, where maybe we just want to create some to-dos and we want to separate out those to-dos between maybe writers on our team. So you can see I've got, hey, this is everything we have to do for the release. This is what I've done. I set Rob to NA here and he's working on this. This is still out for review, or this is still in progress for him. So again, if I have to run into a release meeting and the engineering team says, hey, doc team, how done are we with this, getting the release docs out the door? I know I'm about 85% done. We just have a little bit left to do here. And I walk into that meeting armed with information. So these lists can be saved and new lists can be created based on templates so that you don't have to remember all this stuff. We do have some fun webinars on these checklists on how our own doc team uses them. So if you're interested, check out the webinar library on Central Checklists, and great content on a whole hour spent on checklists. So I encourage you to check that out. All right, I'm looking at the time. I think that kind of wraps up what I wanted to show in terms of the basics of Central and all the various things it can do at a very high level. Let me just go back to PowerPoint here. And I do want to remind, we do have some fantastic questions that are coming in. I don't think I'm going to get to them all, but please don't worry. We're going to do our best to do a follow-up and get everything answered for you. Because I know I went quickly, we didn't have a lot of time. But if you are a current Flare user and you choose to subscribe to MadCap Central for a limited time, you can add Central on a la carte. So you can either add Central or upgrade to the authoring and management system, AMS, which includes Central and SMEs and some other fun things. But if you subscribe to a 12-month subscription of any of these, Central or AMS, then you get 15 months for the price of 12. So you get a little bit extra time on your subscription, which is kind of nice. So please contact sales if you have questions about that. If you are new to Flare, or you are perhaps renewing your maintenance. If you purchase or renew a 24 or 36 month maintenance plan or subscription, then we can actually give you 6 months of MadCap Central, which would include an author and actually 2 SME seats free for 6 months to try. So if you are in that place, contact your sales rep or email sales@madcapsoftware.com. It's a great way to test this free of charge, and we can help you get onboarded. We can do additional Central trainings with you. We're there to help you and make sure you're successful using it. But it's just a fun way of getting it free for 6 months and try it out. So, okay, let's take a look here. We do have some questions in the last bit of time, and I apologize for staying over. So if you want to hang on a little bit with me, I'll do my best to get through some of these. Let's have a look. So a question came in, how does Central compare to Madcap Pulse? Well, that's a really good question. So for those of you who maybe have been in the Madcap family for some time, we did have a server component that we sold for some time called Madcap Pulse. And Madcap Pulse was sort of the back-end analytics to your output. Well, Central's essentially replaced that. It's about half the price and 100 times easier to set up and configure. So Pulse isn't actually offered anymore. We can get those output analytics now with Central at a much more affordable price and with a much easier time in terms of managing it. No server installs required, nothing like that. All we need is that Central account in order to get those output analytics. So here's a question, and this is sort of was asked a couple different ways, and so I'm going to just sort of summarize here, just to kind of kill a few birds with one stone. But the question is, how are files handled if two people collide on the same file at the same time? How is that handled? Well, that's the beauty of source control. With the Git philosophy, because there's no, it's a distributed source control system, there's always this concept of a local copy and then the remote repository. So there's no locking the files in the Git world. So if you happen to be multiple authors in the same Flare project and you're connected to source control, if you do run into that situation where you actually collide on a file, let's say I'm in that particular topic, I make a change, I push my changes to Central. Okay, well, 30 minutes later, my colleague has that same topic open. He or she makes a change to that topic and they try to push to Central. Well, because we've got source control there, within Flare, Flare's going to say, hey, you've run into a conflict. You're not looking at the most current version of that file. Do you want to do a comparison of what you have versus what's up on the server and either merge those changes in and manage it? So all of that conflict resolution is available to you if you do happen to collide on the same file and you try to push changes that aren't up to date. So all of that conflict resolution, the merging would happen in Flare, and then you can push those changes to Central. So it's going to let you know if you in fact have collided and you're not looking at the most current version of the file. So question came in, can a task be assigned to a subject matter expert? Can they see them? I thought they could only see the review pane. So good question. To clarify, tasks in that task board, that's only available to authors in Central. SMEs don't participate in the tasks. So they'll be notified when they have to review something, but they can't actually see that active Kanban board that Central provides. So right now that's only limited to authors. And again, kind of tying on that, what user types can create tasks and new projects? Those are that action of creating new tasks and uploading projects to Central, that's for the role of the author in Central, because most likely those are going to be the Flare users. So authors in Central can create tasks, upload projects, have access to analytics, all of those fun things that we saw. Let me ask, here's another question that came up. This was asked a couple times, so I'll kind of bundle them all together. Can you tie tasks in with Jira? My development team uses Jira, and that's what they like to use. And even though I like to use the Central, tasks was really easy, I don't know if it would be appropriate for them to see this task board. That's a fantastic question. My answer today may be very different than it is in the very near future. So at this time, we don't integrate with Jira, but it's a fantastic feature request, something that is being researched internally right now. So not today, hopefully in the future. Is there a process to invite many viewers in bulk? Yes, we can. So we can script something maybe from our Active Directory and get it into the CSV template that we provide. It's pretty simple CSV. It's first name, last name, email. So you can either fill out that CSV yourself or script something from your Active Directory to populate the CSV. Either way is fine. But once we've got that CSV file, then we can bulk invite a bunch of viewers at one time. And we can even assign what sites those viewers are available to them at the time of invite. So you can invite them and assign them to sites kind of in one fell swoop. All right, let me get to some of these others here that are coming in. Thanks for asking. Keep them coming. I'm not sure I'll be able to get to them all given the time, but I'm going to do my best. Okay, so here's a great question. Can you use a mix of Central source control and Git source control, or is it advised to stick to one? Okay, so again, this was asked a couple different ways, so I'm picking this one out, so thanks for asking this question. What I showed you today was something called a single bound model. The only source control that we have in play is Central as the back end. Now, just because I showed you that single bound model, it's pretty quick and easy. That doesn't mean you can't continue to use your own source control platform that you know and love. And in that case, you would be what we call dual bound, where our primary source control stuff is done through the Flare UI. However, we're pushing and pulling, and we're checking in and checking out of our own Git repository, or our own Team Foundation server, or our own Perforce, whatever that source control is that we're using primarily. Primary pushes and pulls, check-ins and checkouts as a team, we're using our source control. You can be dual bound, which means you're going to have a secondary sync to Central, so that Central has to see the most current version of the project in order to send things out for review. So if we need to send a topic for review, for example, we would sync to Central secondarily, and then we can initiate that review. Or if we want Central to do our builds in the middle of the night, at the end of the day, maybe we assign one person to do a secondary sync to Central, so that at 1 a.m. Central says, oh, new files, new stuff. I'm going to wake up and build all of your targets for you, so that when you come in the morning, you have a private staged area to see everything that you all worked on from the night before. So you don't have to use Central as your only source control. You can be what's called dual bound, primarily bound to our own source control and a secondary sync to Central to take care of all the things that Central needs to do in terms of having our projects cloned. Okay, a couple more here, I think, and then we'll let you guys go because we know you're busy. So a question came in: can a viewer look at HTML output? Yes, a viewer can. If it's public, they don't have to even be a viewer. That URL is public. You can make it available to anybody. But if you set that build to private, then you're going to want to associate viewers with that site, because they need to be greeted with a login. They need to be able to create that password in order to view it. So if it's a public site, you don't even have to worry about the viewer thing. You can just make that site available. Maybe it's a link on your website, or you manually send it to people. But the viewer role, which is free in Central, can access those private sites. Okay, so here's a question. I use a lot of snippets. When I send a topic for review, reviewers have to approve each snippet in that topic individually. Is there a way to make it easier for SMEs? They usually don't know the concept of snippets. That's actually a really good question. When we send the topics for review, there is an option. If that topic has snippets in them, you know, snippets are those separate XML files that live in our project. If the topic happens to have snippets in them, they're going to show up in that list of files that we're sending for review, and that little wizard that we saw. You'll see the topic and all of the snippets in that particular topic. If you think those snippets are going to be too much for your reviewers, you can multi-select any file from that list and remove it before you send it. The good news is, when we send it over to our SMEs for review, they're not going to be left with a bunch of black boxes with no content just because you told Flare, hey, don't send the snippet files. They're still going to see the snippet files. They'll still see them in context of the topic. They just won't have a separate file in that pending file review list to review. So they'll have to maybe add a comment above or below the snippet. They won't be able to change it. So you can kind of control how much editing power you give your SMEs as it pertains to those snippets. So you can probably best to remove them before you send them for review. They'll still see them, and they can add a comment above or below, for example. They just won't have those extra files to manage if you think that's going to be too much for them. That's actually common, and that's a very good question, and I hope that helps. Couple questions came in about how do you send multiple topics for review? Well, I used just one. You could actually multi-select a bunch of files if you wanted to from the Content Explorer and send them, or maybe you just use your table of contents. You know, you have a bunch of topics within a node in your TOC. You could right-click and send them all for review if you want. I just had the one, but you can do them in bulk if you'd like. Another good question: is the author notified by email that a reviewer has completed his or her review? If it's just a single reviewer, then yes. But if we ask more than one person to review the file, when the last person clicks submit, then you're going to get notified by email. But you'll still always be able to log into Central and see all of the topics that are out for review. and who's reviewing them and what the status is. The other thing you can do too is if you send a topic for review, let's say you sent it to 5 people, and 4 of the 5 have submitted changes, and reviewer number 5 decided to take an extended vacation, and you can't wait for that reviewer to come back and submit their changes. So if you need to kind of cut that review cord, or cut that review lifecycle short, you can do that. You don't have to wait for that person to come back. And again, you'll see the status of every reviewer that you've invited to review on a file by file basis. You can see that in Central. It'll say open versus completed. But if we need to kind of cut that off prematurely, we can bring back that topic into Flare and start accepting and rejecting the changes that we do have. So even though it's out, not everybody's reviewed it, we can still bring it back in if we want to. We don't have to wait. Okay, so we do have that control. Question came in, will the builds completed in Flare appear in the builds list in Central? Actually, yes. In fact, for this, let me just show you real quick. Let me see if I can pull up Flare here. I want to show you something. And let me open up another, let me open up this one, because this project is bound to Central. So when our project is bound to Central, Central becomes a publishing destination for us. Let me open this up here. Let me open up my target. So a publishing destination is just a final resting place for our output files. So when I say we can publish from Flare to Central, this project is bound to Central. I don't have any other publishing destinations. I don't have any other web servers where this is going to go. But because I'm already connected there, I don't have to think about this. This just becomes a place for me to send my stuff. So if I want to, I can select any other web server that I've chosen here from Flare. Central just happens to be one of them because I'm connected and it's there. So when I click publish, it's going to build it locally and then send those published files to Central. And we'll see for this particular project, when we go to the builds, we'll see that build show up in Central, and it would be here. Let me go to a project. Oh, let's take a look at this one. And these are all built in Central, but this would actually change. This little image, it wouldn't be the Central image, it would be Flare. So a new row would show up, and this would say Flare, and that would just let us know that publish action actually came from Flare. We didn't build it in Central. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that was a good one. I hope that made sense. Again, bound to Central, it becomes an automatic publishing destination if we want to kick off the publishing action from within Flare. Question is, how does this work for PDF outputs? Well, I've only showed these here, but we can do the same thing with PDF. So if I look at my sites here, I think I have a few sites on PDF. Let's take a look at this one. So here's a PDF. Let me see. I think this is behind a login, so let's do that too. But this is a PDF that's private and that I'm hosting on Central. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, well, it remembered me. I was logged in. So here's a PDF. It is private. But this is all of my content, so I could download it if I want to, but initial access to it is locked because I had it set to private, but live in Central. So it works for HTML5 and PDF files as well. Okay, somebody asked too, can I get analytics if I publish all of my content to Zendesk or Salesforce? Actually, no. If Zendesk or Salesforce is going to be the presentation layer for your Flare topics, which you can do, then you're not using the Flare search to find information. So we don't get the analytics. So even though we can publish directly to those ecosystems, which is fine, we get the search data when we're using Elasticsearch or the Flare search, and we're generating a Flare HTML5 site. So you would be relying on those platforms to give you any kind of output analytics that you have. Okay, a couple other questions here. Okay. Do we have to host, if we want to publish our content to our own Amazon S3 buckets, can we do that and still get output analytics? We do not want to host in Central. We have to control our output. Yes, you absolutely can. Remember, the output can be hosted anywhere. All you need is that one central account to tell the target that you want to start tracking it. Once you publish to that Amazon S3 bucket and your users start hitting it, you're going to see that data show up automatically here within the analytics that you're tracking in Central. Okay, let's keep going. I think we have time for one more. Thanks for hanging on. Great. So we had another, I think I answered, we had just another one come in about Jira, which I answered. So again, not yet, but hopefully in the very near future. So a question came in, does the analytics allow for you to remove people from your company from the data? That's a really good question. Not at this time. We can't exclude, we don't have any visibility into IP addresses now. I'm not saying that that may change in the future, but right now we don't. Everybody that hits that site that you're tracking is you're gonna get data. So one way around that, and some people do this, where maybe you have a knowledge base that you're creating for some folks internally to your organization. And again, that knowledge base can be published out of Flare, it can be anywhere. It can be in Central, your own servers, on their desktops, doesn't matter. You could create an entirely different knowledge base, the same content, but for your customers or for another population of users. And you can track those separately. So those would be just two different targets in Flare that you're tracking with two separate analytics keys. So you can separate out, okay, how is the QA team looking in my knowledge base? What are they doing in there versus what are my customers doing? So we don't have a way of filtering IP, but one quick way around that is just create a separate output in your project and track it separately. But that's a really good feature suggestion, something that I hope we can support in the future. Is dual bound possible if you use Git outside of Flare? That's not recommended. Actually, if you want to be properly dual bound, you want to bind your project to Git through Flare and use and do it that way and create the bindings from the Flare project and be secondarily synced. So that would be a proper workflow if you want to set up the dual binding. Always feel free to contact us if you have any questions about some of the mechanics there. We can certainly help you with that. But proper workflow would be bound to your primary source control through Flare and then secondarily bound to Central. Question came in, if you don't select include in search engines, will the search engines actually be blocked? Well, what we're saying is if we go to our site here, and if I go to one of my private sites, let's do this one again, and we take a look at the settings. If we tell Central, oh, I'm sorry, let's go to a public site rather, because the private one is, the search engines are never gonna find it because we're setting it to private. But let's go ahead and edit our settings. If we set it to live, we're basically allowing the search engines to crawl and index it. You're kind of at the mercy of the search engines at that point. It's a little bit of a black box, for Google to search and display these things. So the URL would be available. So if I set it to live, I said, hey, Google, Bing, whatever, don't crawl this content. This URL is still available to anybody that gets their hand on the URL, but the search engines won't ever crawl and index this information and retrieve it as a part of like a Google search, for example. So that's what that checkmark box means. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and I think we got a lot of questions answered, but there are a few that we didn't answer, so please don't worry. We're going to take some time to answer all these things and get them back to you. I do want to thank everybody for attending. I know this was a lot of information in a short amount of time, and as always, I didn't manage the hour well and I went over, so I'm so sorry because I know you all are so busy. But I do want to thank you all for attending. I hope you found it helpful. If there are any questions that you'd like to see in a little bit more detail or features that you'd like to see in a little bit more detail, or if you have questions about the promotion, please get in touch with us here directly. Feel free to contact your rep. You can contact me directly. Jmorse, Jmorse at madcapsoftware.com. I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Happy to talk through some of these things in a bit more detail as well. And so if you're ever interested in getting the analytics set up just on a test basis, let me know. We can help with that too. Might as well get the data for free for 30 days because isn't that great? Data that's good data is always awesome. And if it's free, even better. So try it for 30 days. Give it a go and let us know what you think. It can always help you. So thanks everybody for joining. We'll be rendering this and sending it out as a recording to everyone and following up with the remaining questions that I didn't get to live. So thank you so much, everybody. So happy to have you here. Fun to see some familiar faces and some new ones too. I'm so grateful that you chose to spend this time with me, and hope that we can connect again on a future webinar or training class. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your week and have a restful weekend.